My name is Josh Perlstein. I have been a member of your district for I think about 10 minutes. I literally just packed my car up and I moved here from Massachusetts. I grew up in Connecticut, however, so I guess thank you for offering this opportunity to speak. I want to talk about a bill that you, I believe, are a co-sponsor of. And I was thinking about this. I have been teaching at Central Connecticut State University for 25 years. In my classroom, I not only encourage but welcome different opinions. That's how the university functions. So I thought about that. I thought about the events recently in Charlottesville and the questions of free speech and whether there needs to be limits on free speech and where that comes from. I heard a very earnest and articulate young man who's a reporter for the University of Virginia newspaper who said he has had to rethink that in light of the events. But what I want to ask you has to do with BDS, which is a system by which Palestinian people who are advocates for the Palestinian people have sought, and I believe found, a nonviolent and direct way of addressing this. But I'm not even here to try to convince you that you should support that. I am very concerned, though, about a bill which seems to discourage, if not criminalize, free speech as related to that particular topic. The bill, I believe, calls for fines of up to $250,000, imprisonment of up to 20 years, just for speaking about it. And if that's not correct, as I believe Senator Hillenbrand was educated a couple of weeks ago, and she withdrew her sponsorship from that bill, I'd just like to hear what you have to say as to whether your sponsorship, or I believe sponsorship of that bill, that you would pull back from that and at least allow those of us that do believe in nonviolent direct action to have a voice. And finally, I'd like to say, on behalf of my 98-year-old mother, who grew up in New Milford, was a resident of Fairfield County for most of her 98 years, and recently said to me that she was very, very, very discouraged by the behavior of the state of Israel. This is a woman who is a lifelong Zionist. She's the president of Hadassah, head of UJA, all of these things. And she said to me, we must allow the voices to be heard. So I just want to know how you would respond to that.
Well, thank you. First of all, welcome back, I guess, to the district, and hope you stay. And first of all, I share totally your opening comments that we live in a time right now where we're really getting back to basics in terms of fundamental values and institutions in our country, and a free press and freedom of speech, and protecting the ballot. I mean, all these are really amazingly kind of in play, and we need to be as vigilant as possible to make sure that they are protected. We have gotten some letters, which probably not come as a great surprise to many of you, about the legislation which you described, which is, this is the way I see it, okay? And I will, as I said earlier, there's only one Ten Commandments. Anything that's been drafted or anything that's been enacted is always subject to discussion, debate, and change in terms of flaws that people correctly identify. The measure is, again, it's an anti-boycott legislation. It was, in my opinion, tracking existing anti-boycott laws that have been on the books for many years in this country. As I think some of you who are real students of this issue know, there was an anti-boycott law that was passed in 1979 in response to the Arab League boycott that was aimed at Israel. And it did contain penalties that were challenged in court a number of times. And what the courts determined, in my research, is that it was not aimed at free speech, it was aimed at commercial conduct. And that is something that they said was legitimate. in terms of the measure that was passed and signed into law by Jimmy Carter, of all people, who could hardly be described as a knee-jerk supporter of the state of Israel. And that position of opposition to governmentally organized boycotts is something that's been the policy of this government for many years, including under President Obama. So the measure that was introduced was in response to the fact that there have been international government organizations that are now organizing boycotts of Israel, which the U.S. voted against at the UN Human Rights Council when that measure came up in it was either 2015 or 2016. And that is in play, that's happening out there. And this, as I read the bill, was just simply incorporating the existing enforcement structure that was put into place back in 1979 to this new effort that's out there right now. So, having said that, I am more than willing to sit down and scrub, the language of this, whether or not it extends to different kinds of conduct, and because that's unacceptable, and that's just not something that I, would ever advocate for. People should have the right to speak out in favor of a boycott, divestiture, and frankly, they should be able to do it in terms of their own private business. The law that was passed in '79 was really about doing boycotting in conjunction with the Arab League and other groups that were putting this stuff together. And so, again, we have actually been talking to the Congressional Research Service, Library of Congress, and they have been scrubbing this language. They agree with half of what my understanding was, that it did incorporate the 1979 law and it did not extend any new penalties or a scope of conduct. But there is one area of the bill that they described as ambiguous, and I don't like ambiguous. Okay, so I would welcome the opportunity to continue to have this dialogue with you and the other folks that are here this evening, because these are important issues in terms of preserving people's willingness to speak out. And by the way, as somebody who voted for the Iran nuclear deal, it was the most intensely lobbied measure by AIPAC and also, frankly, the government, the Netanyahu government. And I was the first member from Connecticut to support the president's package. I do think the state of Israel is different than the Netanyahu government, and I still believe that, and I make a distinction between that. But I think that hopefully the alliance will be more enduring and more positive in terms of trying to resolve the conflict.